Great. Before we get started, I would also like to introduce a few partners on the line who have been integral to the development of the tool and core partners on the tool as well. We have Jimena Serrano from the Inter-American Development Bank. Jimena, can you hear me? I don't know if your audio is on. I was going to turn it over to you, but it doesn't look like your audio is on. We also have Aditi from BSR. Aditi, are you there? Oh, Aditi, are you muted on your side? Okay, well, maybe we can circle back later if you unmute yourself. Just some technical issues. Once you have a question during the question and answer section of the webinar, please feel free to either ask in the question pane, which is section A on the screen here, or raise your hand with the little hand icon on your screen, and I can turn to you. If you want to keep yourself unmuted, that would be great, as I have controls here to mute and unmute participants once you have a question. Oh, Aditi, I think you're here. Aditi, can you hear me? I've unmuted you. Aditi?
Everyone, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Aditi
great.
is up. A few comments.
I'm sorry I missed that piece.
Oh, Aditi, I'm turning to you to give a little update on how BSR is using the tool as a core partner.
Sure. Thank you, Thilsi, and thank you, everyone, for joining today's webinar. You know, BSR has been really excited about this tool and its development. We've turned to many of our members to let them know that this tool exists, its functionality, and we've been helping many of our members to undertake the assessment, and companies have found it to be extremely valuable in helping them understand how well they're performing against the WEPs. It really has been an important implementation tool to really understand some of their gaps, some of their areas of opportunity to move forward. And we've been helping companies just to think through what the results mean for them. And so, of course, you know, there's a specific scenario that your company is facing, and taking a look at these results and thinking about how to put in place a concrete action plan to improve your performance. So it's really been a very, very valuable resource to our members, and we really look forward to more companies using it.
Great. Thank you so much, Aditi. I think Jimena is also on the line, so I'll just give her a quick minute as well, as she is a core partner on the tool. Jimena, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much to the UN Global Compact and for everyone to join. So on the side of the Inter-American Development Bank group, which is the development bank for Latin America, we've been working with our clients with which we invest, for example, in any type of project that does not necessarily relate to gender. So I'm talking about, you know, solar energy plants or expanding capacity in agribusiness, for example. What we've been doing with the tool is really try to mainstream gender in these investments. And the tool has been great to introduce a topic like gender equality, which our companies in the region are not always familiar with, but it has helped us to really inform our companies really quickly where they are in their journey. So very much like BSR was mentioning, we are helping our companies, our clients, to understand where they are in this journey and to help them implement actions that will help them improve in specific areas. So the feedback we've been receiving is that it's a really easy to use tool, and we are, you know, very much looking forward to continuing working with companies and our clients in improving gender equality. Thanks, Tulsi.
Great, thank you so much, Jimena. All right, without further ado, let's get to the meat of the presentation here. So I'm actually going to start with a video that explains the overview of the tool, or gives a good overview of the tool, and then we'll go from there. So here we go.
If women and men participated research is clear. Gender equality is an enormous opportunity for businesses to improve their own performance. Companies with at least one woman in senior management tend to see significantly higher annual performance. By closing gender gaps, companies benefit through increased productivity and higher retention. Investors are increasingly looking at the gender equality performance of companies as an indicator for potential growth. Beyond advancing gender equality and women's empowerment internally, companies can impact all areas of society and be a leader in creating lasting, positive change. Despite this opportunity, many social, economic, and legal barriers for women still exist, preventing them from entering the workforce, progressing in their careers, and growing their businesses. In fact, at the current rate of change, it will take more than 100 years to achieve gender equality. So how can your company accelerate the pace of change? Introducing the WEPs Gender Gap Analysis Tool. It's a self-assessment tool that improves your company's ability to assess current gender equality policies and programs and identify gaps and opportunities for improvement. The WEPs tool is based on the Women's Empowerment Principles, a holistic guidance to businesses on empowering women everywhere, the workplace, marketplace, and community. More than 190 companies worldwide contributed to its design process. The WEPs Gender Gap Analysis tool allows companies everywhere to understand best practices, existing resources, and international standards, driving gender inclusiveness and women's empowerment. The WEPs tool is free, user-friendly, and strictly confidential. By using the WEPs Gender Gap Analysis tool, your company can assess its strategic approach to gender equality, identify gaps and opportunities for continuous improvement, learn global gender equality best practices, benchmark against peers and industry standards, contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, and turn the global goals into local business. Are you ready to lead the change? Don't get left behind. Start your assessment today. Visit www.webs-gapanalysis.org to access the WEPs Gender Gap Analysis tool.
Great. So now you've got a brief overview of the tool. We will continue on with further details on what the functionalities of the tool are. So just as background for people that are not familiar with the Women's Empowerment Principles. The Women's Empowerment Principles were developed in 2010 by UN Women and UN Global Compact as tested guidance to business to empower women, or for business, I should say, to empower women in the workplace, marketplace, and community. It's a set of 7 principles that cover everything from women in leadership to equal pay, to non-discrimination, to empowering women in your community, to looking at how to bring in women-owned businesses into your supply chain. The principles are really meant to elaborate the gender dimension of corporate sustainability, the UN Global Compact's 10 principles, as well as contribute to UN goals and values with a gender lens. The main mechanism for businesses to engage with the Women's Empowerment Principles is through the CEO Statement of Support, which is an aspirational statement for CEOs at the highest level to sign on to demonstrate that they will be make progress on gender equality and implement the Women's Empowerment Principles. Over 1,400 CEOs from around the world to date have signed the statement, indicating willingness and the importance of achieving gender equality around the world. However, we have received, since the development of the Women's Empowerment Principles in 2010, some questions from companies about, now that they've signed the CEO statement, what to do next. So this tool is really meant to fill that gap and help companies or guide companies from signing the CEO statement to implementing the 7 principles. The Women's Empowerment Principles Gender Gap Analysis tool, as you heard from the video, is business-driven, it's user-friendly, and it's strictly confidential in that all results are confidential and companies are strictly kept anonymous in their results. However, as you heard from BSR and from the Inter-American Development Bank, if companies are interested in working with partners to further advance on gender equality in their gap areas that are identified through the tool, they're more than welcome to share their results with their partners. Just a little bit of information and background on how the tool was developed. We really wanted a tool that that responded to company needs and created something that was really business friendly and driven. And therefore, we committed to an extremely consultative process. The first consultation was back in March in 2016, where we were seeking to really develop kind of the blueprint for the tool. What we heard from companies at that point was that companies really wanted something that was quick and easy, where they could identify major gaps, something that didn't take days or months to complete, but that could really be completed in a few hours. They also wanted a tool that would help them navigate the vast landscape of gender equality resources. And finally, we heard that companies were really interested in benchmarking. So we took all this feedback back and started creating a blueprint for the tool. We didn't want to recreate the wheel, as we knew that there were many other good gender equality resources or indicators out there. And therefore, our implementation partner, BSR, began mapping the existing landscape of gender equality indicators and questions, and held expert consultations and interviews to determine what was needed and how we could best source what was currently out there, so that we could house it under one platform for an easy and navigatable tool for companies. Then we embarked on a series of global consultations with companies from around the world. And as you can see from the map here, we really tried to do our best to get input from all around the world. We heard companies, we compiled lists of good practices from around the world, and we really decided that this tool was going to take the tall task of being globally relevant. So we sourced as many good practices from around the world and determined, what was best practice that should be included in this tool. The final indicators were determined at the end of the consultation process and piloted with a group of 25 companies that provided feedback on the final assessment. The pilot companies determined that it took about 2 to 3 hours to complete the final assessment once all information was gathered, and business friendly in terms of the format and the results. Eventually, we hope that the tool will generate sufficient data to help companies benchmark against their peers, benchmark themselves against their peers in an aggregate data format. So we're hoping to use the data in an aggregate form so that companies can compare themselves to other companies in their region and sector at an aggregate level. We also hope to produce a report with the results again at the aggregate level to better inform the gender data gap. We recognize that this assessment is setting the bar high, but really encourage companies to annually take the tool so that they can continue to measure progress. Just a brief overview before we dive into what the tool actually looks like. The methodology is based again on the 7 women's empowerment principles. So all the questions are really aligned with the 7 principles. It's capturing real-life business practices on women's empowerment, and the format is 18 multiple-choice questions that are based around policy and practice. As you can see, we used the 4 management steps listed on your screen to understand where companies are in their policy development, their practice implementation, their measurement of the success of their practices and policy, as well as the transparency around what they're reporting. We felt this framework really gave companies an opportunity to approach different gender equality issues at different stages, but recognize that all of these components are very important for a holistic gender equality strategy. The overall tool is formatted under 4 main buckets. The first one is really looking at the leadership and strategy of the overall gender equality approach. Then we go into the workplace and we look at different gender equality issues within the workplace, everything from maternity and paternity leave to gender equality, pay equality, or work-life balance. And then we move to the marketplace, again, looking at women-owned businesses, how you're integrating gender equality standards and ethics into your supply chains, as well as your marketing and product development practices. And finally, the tool ends with questions around how you're integrating women and girls' rights within your community human rights best practice. So here's kind of the structure of the tool. The results are based on company progress and depth of implementation. There's extra emphasis on practices that are enshrined in international conventions, and so where we found that a practice was, really in respect of human rights, this was given more weight to those that were support functions of gender equality. And we'll go through some examples of that as we get in. So with that, I will dig into the tool, and let's take a look. So this is the main homepage of the tool itself. Here you'll find kind of the bar where you can get some overview information around the tool, the methodology, and FAQ if you have questions around it. You can take the tool directly from here, as well as this big orange button. Here you're directed to resources. So as we heard from the consultations themselves, companies were really interested in being directed to resources that could help them specifically with the gaps identified. So here is our library of resources, as well as your account and going directly to your own dashboard. Now I'll go into the back end as you start to set up your own account. Every individual is asked to set up an account. If you're a company, you're asked specific information around your company size, your revenue, and et cetera, your sector. And again, this is all meant to be confidential and will never be linked back to your individual company, but rather once we use the data at the aggregate level, we will look to disaggregate by different region or sector. If you're a nonprofit or a non-business organization on the line and interested in taking the tool to better understand what it offers or help the companies that you work with, you're welcome to do so, but we ask that you identify yourself under organization type right here as non-business, so that it does not impact the final results. Once you're all set, you go ahead and create an account, and then you have your own dashboard where as you see here, this company has not yet completed any assessments, but from here you can go ahead and take the tool. You can preview the questions in a PDF, so if you're not ready to answer the questions online, but would rather see the questions in a PDF format so that you can gather all the information before you start filling online, you may do so through this PDF. There's also a navigation pane with frequently asked questions, as well as you can always go back to the home page. Once a company starts beginning the assessment, your dashboard will track your previous assessments so that you can see progress over time and view those results, as well as capture any incomplete surveys. As mentioned, I think this is a great tool to measure progress annually. So we do encourage companies to come back in a year and fill out the tool again to see where your progress are and your gaps as well, so that you can redesign your strategy for the next year to address those gaps. So here is an example of the questions. This one is specifically around does your company support employees as parents and caregivers? All of the questions are formatted in this type of language. So does your company have an approach to X, so maternity leave or equal compensation? And then companies have an opportunity to select what is most relevant. If they're interested in learning more, they can click here. If they don't have an approach, but they're interested in taking in the next year, they can click here. And then if some of their country offices or business units have taken steps, but not all of their company has done so, they can click here. If you click here under yes, you will be taken to an additional screen or kind of drop down where you're able to provide further details on what you mean by having an approach. So then, as I mentioned, each of the questions are broken up into commitment, implementation, measurement, and transparency. And again, we really felt that this provides kind of a holistic strategy to advancing any one particular gender equality issue, but also gives the flexibility for companies that are entering the gender equality space for the first time to see where they are on different aspects, and they may have the practice but not the policy yet, and so this really gives them an opportunity to show what they have but also see where their gaps are. So as you'll see in this first question, the commitment is really around policies and how those policies have been developed, and then the implementation is really around practice, what types of practices the company has to support that broader concept. So for here, for example, we're talking about providing support to parents. And then measurement is how the company measures this specific practice or policy. And finally, we're asking if companies are reporting this to their stakeholders. You'll see on the right-hand side there, you also have a navigation pane, which allows you to go back to any of the questions that you've answered previously. So then once you've completed all 18 of the questions, you get a result here. And it really is based on the percentage of the answers that you've completed. So the range is from beginner to leader, and each score is matched up with a different range here, as you can see. And as I mentioned, we've really noticed that this tool does set the bar high in that we have sourced good practices from around the world, and have noticed that many companies have been surprised by their results, but enlightened that there are opportunities for further improvement, and have taken the results and gone back and further strategized. So this is kind of the main results page. You then scroll down and you get to see your score by individual question. So as you can see, each question is laid out here, and it shows by the kind of gradation bar down at the bottom there, how well you've scored on each question. So as you can see, on equal compensation, this company did, or this fake company that I created did quite well on equal compensation and has had policies and practices in place to do that. Whereas on access to quality health services for women, there definitely needs to be some improvement. You're able to click into each of the questions to better understand how you performed within the management steps. So for example, if I clicked into question number 9 here, work-life balance, you can see the overall breakdown here with how you answered on commitment, implementation, measurement, and transparency. So this company had 33% of the overall score that you could get for that question. There are some questions where it may just not be applicable for the company, and therefore companies have the opportunity to answer not applicable. Those questions, if you do answer that in your survey, they do not impact your overall score. So as you can see, these questions are grayed out. And then finally, the last piece of information that you'll get is the kind of progress by management steps. And this really allows you to see kind of from a holistic perspective where further resources or attention can be paid. So for example, in this example, the company is doing quite well on policies and practices, quite well on policies, okay on practices, but really need some improvement on reporting to stakeholders on how they are advancing gender equality and what their policies and practices are really meaning to their stakeholders. How are they communicating that to them? So that's a great kind of progress bar that you can look at from the overall holistic piece of the tool to see where, from a strategy standpoint, further resources can be put. Then also, as I mentioned, there's a resource section. So when you click into an individual question, or back on the main page where you get that overall score, there's an opportunity to see different resources that link to that area. So for example, back to question 9, if you click view resources, all the resources that are tagged work-life balance will populate so that you have an opportunity to go and see what further action can be made in this space. Now, before opening to questions and answers from the audience, I would like to turn to Bianca Chow from Fossil Group, who will give a brief kind of overview of her company's experience with taking the tool and anything that they learned while taking it. So Bianca, I turn to you.
Awesome, thank you so much. I just wanted to take a few minutes to share some insights, excuse me, from our experience in taking the self-assessment this year. So I'm part of the sustainability team at Fossil Group, and we are a global company but based in the US. And so it was important for us, as we're kind of in the process of understanding where we can make the biggest possible impact when it comes to sustainability as well as women's empowerment as we can. And I would say we're pretty early in our journey, and so it was very, very helpful for us to use the self-assessment tool to understand where we stood today. We have an ambition to aspire to become a leader in the women's empowerment space by 2020, and that's kind of our man on the moon ambition. And so I would say in wanting to take steps to get there, we wanted to understand what our baseline was. So using an online tool that was global was very helpful for us because we have internal stakeholders all over the US as well as around the globe. And so the fact that we could print out a PDF of the tool and start to socialize, for one, the importance of taking the self-assessment, but also start to socialize who would help us best understand how to answer and who should answer to establish that baseline was really helpful. I would say the other piece was we took the extra step of partnering with BSR, who was already a longtime partner of ours, to ensure that we were being very, very, I would say, honest in taking the self-assessment and understanding how to be really disciplined and answer in a way that we didn't take credit for work that was kind of being brainstormed but hadn't started yet. So we really wanted to understand as a baseline where we stood today so that when we took the tool each year, we could measure our progress and identify those gaps where we really needed to accelerate our work. But it also helped us confirm where we thought maybe we were making good progress and should continue to do that. So it was incredibly valuable for us to use a self-assessment. Again, the way we socialized it was not necessarily describing it as a quiz or wanting to get a really great score in taking it the first year, but really understanding what our baseline was so we could then monitor and track how we were making progress in different areas throughout the organization. So I can share that we have completed the assessment. What we also worked on with BSR was a benchmarking component, so we could understand, looking at other leaders in our space, as well as the tech space, because that is an emerging market for us. We just wanted to understand how we compared, and that just gave a little bit more of a tactical context in terms of understanding the results, but then looking at how other leaders in the space execute that, whether it was a case study around implementation or whether it was language around a leadership position they had taken and how they communicate that to their internal and external stakeholders. And so what I can also share is based on those results and the benchmarking, and as well as kind of how we started to look at what we should prioritize, we're now more comprehensively building out our women's empowerment strategy globally in 17, and that's also helping us determine what those really aggressive and smart goals would be for 18, 2019, and hopefully help us get to 2020. And I say that our 2020 ambition is kind of a man on the moon target, because when I look at the landscape, I'll be transparent in that we don't necessarily know every step that we're going to take to get there, but we want to give our global employees license to operate in terms of challenging the status quo and really pushing the envelope. And so not only does that ambition that give us kind of that license to operate, but it also is setting this target as to how we really want to help in making progress happen, not only for our employees, but in the communities where we work, live, and play when it comes to advancing the progress of women. So the tool is very, very easy to use, very helpful for us, especially since it was a self-assessment to say, you know, where we are today and establish that baseline. It took all the emotion out of it, which I know at some companies, when you start talking about gender equality and women, it can get a little uncomfortable and even emotional. And so for us, the self-assessment was a very objective way to understand where we were at today, and it helped us establish a baseline so that we can continue to make progress year over year, and if anything, kind of accelerate some of the things that we're thinking should be a priority, as well as help shine a light on some areas where we might not have realized we have a gap and can start to make some progress in that area. So we really enjoyed using the tool. It was very helpful for us, especially as a global company that has stakeholders around the globe. It just really helped us level set where we're at today, so that we know how to make progress and where to really prioritize our next steps.
Great. No, thank you, Bianca. And you brought up some good points that I would like to build upon. Exactly as you say, this is definitely meant to be a learning tool for your company. And so, you know, really taking advantage of that and being honest is really important there, because it only benefits your company. We're not taking the results. It's completely confidential. So, you know, thanks for bringing that to light, Bianca. Also on the goals and targets piece, you know, that's a great point. It does help you identify where goals and targets need to be set. And one of the pieces of the tool that actually wasn't shown in this PowerPoint, but if you make a count, you'll see is you're also able to fill in kind of some quantitative measures that help you you know, look at how your policies and practices are actually working within your organization. So you're able to input some quantitative numbers around equal pay or number of women in different positions within your organization, and see how those change over time. Finally, in regards to the benchmarking piece, that is definitely something we've heard from companies, and we're working with our data partner KPMG to get that up and running once we have enough companies taking the tool to have some reliable benchmarks that companies can then at the aggregate level see where they measure compared to their peers. So all great points, Bianca, and thanks so much for giving your insights from Fossil Group. I will now turn to the audience to see if there are questions on the functionality of the tool, the platform, any other questions. There was one question that already came in, so I'll start with that one as people think of their other questions regarding how many staff members should be taking the tool. Should multiple staff members be taking so that it can be validated, or should it be one staff member? And that's a great question. It should be taken by one representative of the company, as you want it to be reflective of the company's overall performance. However, as Bianca even mentioned, we definitely recognize that many of the questions in the tool will need input from different parts of the organization. So we really encourage you to consult, for example, your procurement folks or your HR folks, or depending on where you sit within the organization, there are definitely other functions within the organization that may be needing to be consulted. So that actually in our FAQs on the website, it gives you some guidance on who may need to be consulted. You can also print out the PDF, as I mentioned earlier, which will give you insights into who you may need to go to ask these questions. But again, it is really meant to be, if you're taking it for the first time, an opportunity to baseline your current gender equality work, and then move towards progress. Now, I do recognize that some companies are structured differently, and so if there are companies that have global headquarters but would like to take it kind of independently with their subsidiaries throughout the world, and then kind of funnel those results up to a focal point, that has been discussed at some companies. Also, if you have different business units or different business lines, there have been some companies that prefer to take it independently that way. So we recognize that every company is structured differently, and really leave to you to decide what makes most sense. Great. So we have another question of, can you share more examples of questions included in the tool? Of course. So, I can definitely pull up the PDF, but basically the questions, as I can go back as well, are structured around the four main themes there. So the first one is leadership and strategy. So looking at, does your organization or does your company have an overall gender equality strategy? How is this developed? What type of input was given? Does it have robust targets and goals around gender equality? So that's kind of the strategy piece under leadership and strategy. Then we move to the workplace, and it really covers everything from non-discrimination to maternity and paternity leave to health and safety to equal compensation. So probably workplace is the area where there's the most questions you'll see. And then as we move to marketplace, the questions are around when you're developing a product, do you consider the needs and the access for women and girls to that product? Advertising, are you thinking about gender stereotypes? Are you negatively portraying women? Are you making a conscious effort to positively portray women? Those kind of things in your advertising. Also, as mentioned, looking at your supply chain, are you integrating women-owned businesses into your supply chain, as well as working with your suppliers to ensure that they have the same strategy or goals and targets around gender equality. And then moving to the community, the questions are really about making sure that women and girls' human rights are integrated into your overall human rights impact assessments. So making sure that when you're conducting a human rights impact assessment, you consider the rights of women and girls. And then the second question in the community bucket is around kind of the CSR and advocacy piece, and you know, looking at to make sure that women and girls are beneficiaries of your philanthropy efforts. So that's kind of the main structure and questions of the tool. I welcome you to go check out the PDF, which is on the homepage, as well as once you log in. This tool, so the next question is, can this tool be applied to any company, even those who have not joined the WEPs? Yes, this is a public good, so we welcome all companies to take the tool, those that have signed the WEPs and those that have not. You know, definitely open and encourage everyone to use it. Those that, you know, I think it's a good linkage to signing the WEPs in terms of getting that high level of support and commitment to gender equality. Once you've taken the tool, or just before you take the tool, you can, you know, demonstrate that high level commitment to gender equality by signing the CEO statement of support. Why should companies follow or use the gender gap analysis tool? What are the particular benefits, unique features of the tool? When I look for tools, I find a number of tools for gender equality, and there's, you know, just so many. How am I, you know, which one should I choose from is another question. You know, it's a great point. I think it goes back to, this is a confidential, you know, easy to use. Takes, you know, a couple of hours to fill out, but it does give you a good sense of where your gaps are. It gives you some friendly visuals to directly point to where your gaps are and what opportunities you have to improve those gaps. It also provides you an opportunity to look at good practices that have been globally sourced. So if you need some inspiration for what to do in a particular area, as you go through the tool, you'll see what policies and practices you know, have been considered best practice around the world. So that in itself is a great learning experience. You know, I'm going to also, we have several, or one more question, and then I'm actually going to open back up to the partners to see if they have anything else to add to these questions, as well as open up the line to see if there's any more questions on the line. Have the tools helped in achieving gender equality, the implementation of trade agreements? Are there any examples? That's an interesting question. You know, the tool was just launched this March. It's meant for business. So it isn't necessarily meant for, you know, governments that are working on trade agreements, if that's what you need. But of course, you know, there is an opportunity for other stakeholders to use the good practices in their organizations. So, for example, governments or NGOs or civil society to use it. But you know, since it's just been launched in March, we are still like in the process of promoting the tool and familiarizing companies with it. So we haven't yet collected any data on the tool yet. We're hoping to do that for next March on International Women's Day. When are companies so yes, this recording will be circulated after the call today, as well as posted in our resources in our library. So we'll give a link to that. I'll just turn over to let's see, Lauren Gula, who actually manages our Women's Empowerment Principles Initiative, as well as the Gender Equality Initiative here at the Global Compact, to see if she has any additional information to add in regards to the overall presentation or you know, specific to the questions. Lauren, are you there?
Hi there, Tulsi. No, there's nothing else that I need to add from my end. I think it's a really great presentation, and thanks so much to Fossil for joining us and providing that input on the kind of practicalities around the tool and how, you know, a company is using it. But very happy to answer any further questions from the participants on the line. Tulsi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, great. No, I just wanted to add, given the experience of the IDB group with our clients and our clients taking the tool, that we really encourage you, all the companies in the line that are interested in taking the assessment, to really share the results internally with other areas of the company, because many times other areas in the company don't understand what is the role that they can play in gender equality. And as our panelist mentioned before, it's really a way of really objectively letting or making other areas understand how they can play a role in promoting gender equality. So we've heard from companies during the pilot phase that a great value of the tool was to be able to share the results internally with areas of procurement, or with other areas that not necessarily they see clearly the linkage with gender equality. So that's what I would have to add, Tulsi. Thank you.
Oh, great. Sorry, I think I was on mute. So great. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining. Jimena, it's a great point about mainstreaming gender. I think it's extremely valuable opportunity to bring these questions to your colleagues, to have them think about gender equality in their line of business or in their functionality within the organization. It allows people that are not thinking about gender equality on a daily basis to start thinking about it. Oh, there's one more question, and then we'll close the line. I was wondering if the creators of the tool have considered to include other sections in the tool depending on the social context of some regions of the world. That's from Diana Rico. That's a great question, Diana, and something that we heard during our global consultations is that while this was definitely a tall task to create something that was globally relevant, so we really tried to source those indicators that we heard in consultations were relevant from around the world. However, we do recognize, depending on what country or region that you sit in, or even sector, there may be additional indicators that might be relevant for your context, or slight iterations to the indicators. So this is one of the things that we want to look into going forward for the tool in terms of future iterations of the tool, to make sure that we can build it out further to help companies in different sectors or regions further dig into what it means to be a company in that region or sector. So it's something definitely that we have looked at and we're considering for future phases of the tool. Okay, great. With that, I think there's no other questions. So I'm going to close the line, but feel free to, I'll send around our contact details in the follow-up email, as well as the webinar recording, so that everybody has it. This will be posted as well in our resource section on the website. And we welcome you to begin using the tool within your companies, and feel free to direct any questions our way. Thank you again for joining, and we look forward to being in touch with you.